right. We've let enough time pass for people to join, and otherwise there will be a recording. Hello, thank you all for joining us to this introduction and discussion about Philippine elections and how progressives are shaping it in 2025. This event is hosted by ALPAS Pilipinas, Gabriela Germany, Migrante Germany, Anakbayan UK, and Balik Netherlands, and wouldn't have been possible without you all. I would like to thank everyone who helped with the planning, organization, and realization of today's event. Sophia and I will be your facilitator this evening. I'm Tata and I will guide you through this evening. I would also like to welcome our guest, Lean Redino P. Porquia, who is joining us live from the Philippines. He's a nominee of the BAYAN MUNA Partylist, but he's also the founding national president and current head of the research and education of BPO Industry Employees Network, as well as the lead convener of Citizens Rights Watch Network. And last but not least, he is the former public information and documentation officer of Kilusang Maya Uno. We are incredibly grateful to have you join us in the midst of your campaign at this late hour, as it's already midnight in the Philippines. Thank you so much for your work and commitment. We are honored to have you with us. Before we begin, a bit of housekeeping first. This is a digital meeting, which is being recorded so that people who were unable to attend are able to watch it afterwards or listen to it as a podcast while folding laundry, for example. So there's no need for you to take notes or screenshots of the presentations. You will have the link afterwards. Sophia and I will gloss over some slides very quickly in the beginning to give more time to Lean and your questions afterwards. Please feel free to ask any questions after our presentation. While our part is going to be held in English, Lean might be having his part in Tagalog, depending on what language capabilities we have in this space. We invite you to raise your questions in whichever language you feel more comfortable in. We can't guarantee for any translations besides English, Tagalog, and German, but we're confident that someone else in the audience is capable. Sophia will manage the digital space and make sure that questions raised and comments made will be seen and voiced. So please make sure or make use of the comment or raise hand function. If you do not wish to be recorded, please use the chat function to ask your questions. And without further ado, in this ED, we will try to answer the questions of what is being elected and how they are elected and what are the issues with the electoral system and politics, and most importantly, what's at stake. And for that, we will briefly explain the political system and electoral system first before diving into issues and problems concerning the elections. And after that, we will have ample time for you to ask your questions to Sir Leon. So what is being elected? Think for maybe 5 seconds until I will reveal the answer. It's the half of the Senate and the House of Representatives is being elected this year. Well, actually, there's way more elective positions on the subnational and regional level that are up for elections, but overseas voters can only vote for the first two positions, which is the senators and the party list representatives. What that means, I'll explain in a second. In the following, when I talk about politics, I refer to the national level while I'm explaining. I don't have enough time for the subnational level, and to be honest, I'm at least not knowledgeable enough to speak about it comfortably, so please bear with me. The political system of the Philippines is based on the US political system. Much of the political system today was shaped and imposed by former colonizers, as you might have guessed. There are differences, though, for example, the length of term, the term limit, and there is no electoral college voting for the president. It is, however, a presidential system with a bicameral Congress legislature. The Congress consists of the Senate, which is the upper house, and the House of Representatives, which is the lower house. The president is directly elected by the people and is the head of government as well as head of state. The vice president is also directly elected by the people as well. The Supreme Court is not elected by the people, and as the midterm elections on the national level, at least, are about the Congress, I will focus on that. The Senate is made up of 24 senators who have a legislative term of 6 years and are elected at staggered intervals. This means that half of the Senate is elected every 3 years. In general, there are term limits for many offices at national level. For example, the term limit for presidents is 6 years, and they cannot be re-elected. Senators can be re-elected once, and members of the House of Representatives 2 times. More on the importance and consequences of term limits later. The House of Representatives is composed of 316 seats at present. However, the number of seats grows in accordance with the population. While the House of Representatives only had 250 seats in the first 3 elections after the end of the dictatorship, it has grown to 316 because of the increase of population. Both chambers are roughly equal in power, and the approval of both is required. For instance, the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte is still in process, as only the House of Representatives approved the measures. The process cannot move forward without the approval of the Senate, which is currently not in session anymore and will resume session only after the election in June. We know what is being elected now, but we will take a closer look at how they're being elected. Voting for the Senate is very straightforward. There are 12 seats that have to be filled, and every eligible voter votes for each seat individually. The 12 candidates with the most votes win the seats in descending order. There's no minimum number of votes that must be achieved, simply whoever has the most votes. So, for example, if you see, this is the mock ballot of the people voting overseas would see. So on the left side, you see the list for the senators, and each candidate is listed individually. The electoral system for the House of Representatives is way more complicated. The Constitution states that 80% of the House of Representatives are district representatives representing their provinces and cities, meaning that each of the 253 congressional districts vote for a representative that represents their regional interest in the Congress. The other 20%, which translates to 63 seats, is composed of the party list representatives. The party list system was only introduced after the end of martial law and under the 1987 Constitution. On the right, you see the part of the party list representatives. For the House of Representatives, you only have one vote, so you can only vote for one party among over, I think, 120 eligible parties. But what exactly is the party list system? According to the Republic Act 7941, Section 2, it states, the state shall promote proportional representation in the election of representatives to the House of Representatives through a party list system of registered national, regional, and sectoral parties or organizations or coalitions thereof, which will enable Filipino citizens belonging to marginalized and underrepresented sectors, organizations, and parties, and who lack well-defined political constituencies, but who could contribute to the formulation and enactment of appropriate legislation that will benefit the nation as a whole, to become members of the House of Representatives. Originally, this system was supposed to guarantee representation of underrepresented sectors or groups like labor, peasant, urban poor, indigenous, women, and youth. The 2001 ruling of the Supreme Court specified that nominees for the House of Representatives must come from the marginalized groups themselves, meaning if you wanted to run for youth parties, you needed to be a youth yourself. However, in 2013, the Supreme Court reversed this ruling, stating that the party list representation is not exclusive to marginalized sectors. Party lists are since then open to everyone that share their advocacy. For example, we could form a new party campaigning for the rights of indigenous people without being indigenous ourselves. We will discuss the consequences of this ruling later in our presentation. Who can vote, actually? Every Filipino citizen living in the Philippines for at least half a year that is 18 years old and above. Those are the formal criteria. You still have to actively register to be able to vote. And overseas absentee voting has only been possible since 2003. And for us, the overseas absentee voting, it's basically the same. We have to go to our embassy to register with our Philippine passport and our duly accomplished registration. We had a pre-enrollment period starting from March 10 to May 7. and are now able to vote if we completed all the steps. So if we didn't register until last year and didn't do the pre-enrollment, we unfortunately aren't able to vote. And with that, I'll give the floor to Sophia.
Okay, thank you, Tata. So I will go through now the main alliances that are present in this election. So just so you know, alliances are a coalition of parties, so several political parties that are presenting candidates together. So here you see the main alliances for the senatorial elections. And we have these four main alliances. So the first one, which is Alianza para sa Bagong Pilipinas, you can pretty much just remember it as the Marcos plan and their allies. So that includes the different parties that are listed at the bottom. And one thing to know about the alliances is in the end, it's more of a strategic gathering rather than more of a, well, it depends on which ones, but it's more of a strategic gathering. Then another alliance that you have is the Duterte, which is Duterte and his allies, which include the PDP, which is the Partido Federal ng Pilipinas, which is Duterte's current political party. Then we have the Kiko Bam alliance, which is called kind of like the official opposition, which includes Kiko Pangilinan and Bam Aquino, which has a little bit more of a, let's say, liberal approach to politics. And the one that we are presenting today is MAKABAYAN, and the alliance is Opposition ng Bayan, which is more of the progressive parties that include Bayan Muna, as well as the Association Concerned Teachers, Gabriela, Kabataan. So next slide, please. So just going briefly into MAKABAYAN's program. So you can see there's quite a few things included, which also has, so I'm just going to try to summarize this for you. Sorry, my screen is strange. Okay. So we have one section that, and maybe afterwards, Sir Leanne can also talk a little bit more about it, but so there's a clear focus on, providing for the people through having a living wage, focusing on services for the people through nationalization, free medical services, housing, education, also lowering prices through land distribution and national industrialization, as well as taxing billionaires. There's also a focus on the sovereignty of the Philippines, so getting rid of unequal treaties with foreign powers, as well as peaceful resolution of the conflict in the West Philippine Sea with China. There's a strong focus also on human rights, including women, indigenous people, LGBTQIA+, and OFWs, as well as a focus on establishing a nationalist government, so banning political dynasties, which I'll go into a little bit more after, and restarting peace talks with the NDFB. Next slide, please. So here you can see the senatorial slate for the MAKABAYAN bloc. So these are all community leaders, organizers, activists, and they all come from marginalized sectors and groups. Next slide, please. Going a little bit more into the MAKABAYAN bloc party list. So we just saw the senatorial slate. So those are the candidates for the senatorial elections. And then this for the party list elections. So as I mentioned before, this includes Gabriela, which represents women. We have ACT Teachers, which represents teachers and educational workers. We have Kabataan, which represents youth, and Bayan Muna, which represents marginalized sectors such as workers, farmers, and indigenous people. So at the height of its success, the MAKABAYAN bloc had up to 8 seats in the House, with Bayan Muna winning the maximum 3 seats for several years in a row. But since then, there's been a decrease in the votes towards MAKABAYAN. And so now only Gabriela, ACT teachers, and Kabataan actually have seats in the House. Next slide, please. So a big issue with Philippine politics and elections is the presence of political dynasties. So political dynasties are actually prohibited under the Constitution, but the Congress always struggles to actually pass a law that implements this law because of the fact that it's dominated by political dynasties. So the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism found that over the past century, around 134 families have been the primary source of members in the Philippine legislature. And out of the 86 party list groups for this coming election, according to Contradaya research, 40 of them are linked to political dynasties, 25 of them to big business, and 18 to military and police. Next slide, please. So here you can see a map in terms of the district seats. So those are the ones that, in terms of as an overseas voter, we can't vote for, but it's just good to see what it looks like. So this map shows that 80% of the district seats are held by re-electionist dynasts. So these are people from political dynasties that are seeking re-election, or position swappers. So for example, they're swapping with another relative. And we can see really this domination of the political dynasties within the electoral system. Next slide, please. So how do they stay in power? There's 5 main ways. They usually max out their term limits. After they're done with that, they usually seek higher positions or they swap with some of their relatives. Some families also tend to expand to new provinces, cities, and towns when they can. In certain smaller areas, there's sometimes intra-family rivalry where 2 people from the same family are fighting over the same position, but in the end, this position still ends up in the family. Or as we saw, they join the party list race since they don't need to be part of any minority groups anymore. Next slide, please. So in terms of Philippine elections, there's a few things that can be said. As I mentioned before, it's dominated by political dynasties on pretty much every level. There's a general lack of political ideologies. So there are political parties which make it appear as if there are choices for the people, but it's not really based on ideology. There's also very unequal campaign resources available for the different people, so it's very costly for ordinary people to get into politics. You have a lot of the political dynasties that obviously have, very strong business ties and much more financial resources. For example, one of the candidates, Camille Villar, spent 2.1 billion pesos in ads before the official beginning of the campaign. And so if someone is already elected, they have the resources of the state at hand. Their name is also more attached to government services, so people know them better. So it's more likely that they get reelected afterwards. There is an official campaign period that begins, and before that, so there's rules that are in place during the official campaign period that started on February 11. But before that, there aren't any rules in place to control spending. And actually, there was an attempt to have a rule to control the spending by issuing rules limiting ads. But the TV networks actually questioned the constitutionality of the ad limits, and they brought it to the Supreme Court, and they won, citing the public's right to information. So Philippine elections are also very personality based. So you have a lot of, for example, news broadcasters, actors, influencers, or boxing champions that are um, often up and running for elections. You also get celebrity endorsements sometimes of certain parties. Filipino elections are also very leader-centric. So instead of being citizen-centric, there's a tendency of looking for a leader who is more of a parental and authoritarian figure. The Philippine elections are also have an issue, or there's been this problem of red tagging. So, for example, the NTF-ELCAC filed a disqualification case against Makabayan lawmakers. It was accusing Makabayan of acting as a legal front for the communist rebels and receiving foreign funds. It's since then been junked by the Commission on Elections, but this is a type of misinformation and disinformation that is being used against the progressive bloc. Talking about disinformation as well, there was a fake COMELEC resolution that was stating that the Makabayan bloc had been disqualified in 2022, which obviously was not true. And the Rappler says that up to 45% of discussions for the upcoming elections are driven by fake accounts at the moment. There's also a risk of certain elections, local elections especially, getting violent, sometimes leading to the killings of certain candidates. And there's the issue of cybersecurity. In 2016, there was the hacking of COMELEC by an anonymous Philippines, which was calling actually for tighter security on the vote counting machine. Next slide, please. So what is at stake? You can see above, so food and agricultural security, healthcare, and employment are the main concerns of Filipinos. And most people now are more concerned with inflation compared to back in 2019. There was more of a concern over corruption. And this is because food inflation has been very high in the Philippines, with food inflation being even higher than average inflation. And so there is a correlation between the high concentration of political families and dynasties and underdevelopment and corruption. So when you have a high concentration of dynasties, then there's the services that the people need to be actually addressing things like food and agricultural security, healthcare, and employment are not being taken because of the high level of corruption. And when you have this kind of dynasties that control all of the different branches of the government, it removes democratic check and balances, and pretty much the dynasties can do what they want. Also, on a local level, politically, there's this proxy war between the Duterte and the Marcos clan. So Duterte's recent arrest has been reframed by the Marcos side as a kidnapping, by the Duterte side, as the kidnapping of a frail man that was enabled by Marcos, that there was foreign interference, and this is political persecution. Also, there's the impeachment of Sara Duterte, who is one of the main contenders for the 2028 presidential elections, but she would be disqualified if she's convicted. So the winners of the Senate race in May, so in this month, are likely to sit as judges at the impeachment court against Sara Duterte. And then finally, there's the imperialist war in the Pacific region, with the US turning its gaze more and more towards the Pacific region and imperialist China. Next slide, please. So what can we do? We can raise awareness. We can try to combat misinformation and disinformation where we can. We can promote and support progressive party lists and candidates, as we're doing today. We can also try to increase the knowledge on the party list system, what it is, what it's supposed to be, how it's been taken over by political dynasties. We can support the registration of more overseas voters as well, and demand an anti-dynasty law. So that is it on my side. We just have this one slide that presents pretty much the numbers of the candidates that you would have on the electoral sheet, because it's quite a difficult process, as Tata has already mentioned, and it's good to have in mind the numbers so that you can do it quickly. So these are the numbers of the senatorial slate of MAKABAYAN, and then for the House of Representatives, for the party list, you have number 59 is Bayan Muna. So we will now go into the next part, which will be a presentation by Leanne.
Hi, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you well.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me for this session. And I think pretty much all the discussion points that I have been summarized by both Tata and Sophia. So what I'm going to do now is to deep dive really on what is the situation of the Philippine elections this 2025, what are at stake, and just to go deeper into the dynamics and the relationship between the ruling classes, how it's going to impact the Filipino people, and pretty much the elections moving forward. So, but before I start, now that you've seen my face, is it okay that I turn off my video just so I can save some bandwidth on my internet? I'm really having some problem with my connections right now. So there, you see my face. I'm gonna turn off my video now. Okay. So for my topic, this is the presentation is in Filipino or in Tagalog. So I'll try to translate it in English. But if you have any questions, feel free to raise your questions or just post them on the chat. So this is election 2025. This is the same presentation that we use whenever we have discussions in the communities, in factories, or in other places where we have members or chapters of Bayan Muna, and also other organizations affiliated with Bayan Muna. Next slide, please. For the agenda or for the topics, we will only focus on the first five. The six, seven, and eight, it's really more technical on the process of voting, since we have a new election system or the automated election system. I'm pretty sure for our fellow OFWs, there's a different process, especially on the online voting. So we will be skipping that discussion, but instead, I'll be focusing more on the topics 1 to 5. So the first one is the nature, the characteristic of the elections in the Philippines. I think Sophia earlier mentioned about some high level overview of the elections, and I'll try to deep dive more into the dynamics between the ruling classes in the elections. Second is the condition or the current situation of the political system in the Philippines, especially now that we are within the election period or election process. The third one is the right to vote is technically a democratic right that is guaranteed by the Constitution. What does that mean? What are those guarantees enshrined in our Constitution, Philippine Constitution, that we need to promote, we need to uh, share and make sure that everyone understands really that sacred right of voting. And then number 4, it's the agenda of the Makabayan, especially of Bayan Muna, which is advancing the politics of change. A lot of politicians have been using the change or the concept of change as their platform, but really what is change and what is the concept of genuine political change in the Philippine context. And then lastly, what is the challenge to all the voters? What needs to be done? And with the election in this midterm election 2025, what are at stake, especially that there is an ongoing rising tension between the ruling classes, between the Marcos faction and the Duterte faction as well. So next slide, please. So very briefly, this discusses what is election. And I think generally when we talk about election, it is the process of choosing the leaders of our nation or our country. And similarly, with any other elections, it is a process that the people are able to elect or choose their leaders. I think it was Tata who mentioned earlier that our election is patterned in the US. That is true. And although there are some slight changes, considering that in the U.S. they are electing based on the federal states. There are federal states while there's a federal government as well. And when you elect a president, automatically the political party that the president belonged to would be the same vice president that you are electing. In the Philippines, however, we are electing separately for the president, the vice president, the senators, and the House of Representatives. For the midterm elections, however, we are only electing 12 senators, a party list representative, and then the local government. Next, please. So, what is the elections in the Philippines? So you'll see there in the illustration, in the photo, there's a child bearing a placard. Wala sanang bumoto sa trapo. Loosely translated, hoping no one should vote for traditional politicians, or what we call trapo. So in the Philippines, election is an election. It's a game. It's a playground of trapos, what we call traditional politicians. Traditional politicians, there's really no clear definition of what a traditional politician, if you look at the dictionary. But in the Philippine context, it's quite common that when you say trapo, you are referring to a politician that has been running election after election, making promises, but the promises are not delivered once they win, or once they are elected into position. And those promises are mostly populist agenda or populist statements. Just to give an example, when Marcos ran in 2022, his campaign or his platform was based on a promise that is going to bring down the price of rice in the market to just 20 pesos per kilo. And people were so they think that Marcos would be able to deliver that promise. So they were easily won over by Marcos with that populist statement. Similarly, during Duterte, when he ran in 2016, he said that he's going to end poverty, the drug problem in 3 to 6 months. Just give him 3 to 6 months. He's going to end all the problems in the Philippines. And a lot of people believed him, despite the crisis that we were experiencing before or at the time. So that's loosely the definition of traditional politician or a trapo. Dynasties, of course, in the Philippines, I think earlier there's already an illustration of a Philippine map showing all the dynasties in the Philippines. While the Constitution has defined or there's a provision in the Constitution that prohibits political dynasties. It is not clearly defined, however, what is a political dynasty. So one thing that has become an electoral agenda, this 2025 elections, is for politicians to discuss really in their platforms what is if whether they are pro or against political dynasties. Those who belong to the political dynasties obviously would say they are in favor of the dynasty as long as the people vote them. Would they would bank on the argument that if they're not performing well, the people would not be voting for them. So that's discounting the fact that elections is a playground of landlords, of oligarchs, who are also the same set of people, set of families that belong to political dynasties. And of course, uh, it's a playground. It's a game of big business owners, oligarchs, and also landlords that have been um, uh, lording over haciendas and other huge hectares of land in the Philippines. And in order for them to stay in power, they would use different forms or tools like violence. Later on, we'll be showing you the guns, goons, gold, and also they've included women as a tool to maintain or retain their political power. And then, of course, the abuse and the exploitation, the level of exploitation to the Filipino people by these ruling classes. Next slide, please. So I think earlier it was already shared the different dominant coalitions. The coalitions right now is an offshoot, by the way, of two political factions. By the Marcos faction and the Duterte faction. If you recall, in 2022, there's one big coalition of both factions called the Unity Team. Uh, Others would satirically label them as Unitives. So that faction ended immediately after, when there's a rising tension between Sara Duterte, the vice president, and the president himself, Ferdinand Marcos. Of course, the Duterte faction would want to maintain their stronghold or their political influence, control, and power, not just in Mindanao, but even in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. So as early as 2023, just a few months after the elections in 2022, the rising tension already started when interests by Sara Duterte were not facilitated or accommodated by the Marcos administration. So right now, this 2025, we're looking at two major coalitions of the two political faction, and that's the Alianza of Marcos and then the PDP Laban of the Dutertes. While we recognize that there are other coalitions and political forces, it is important to note that this election, Makabayan, has fielded an almost complete Senate slate. Later on, we'll answer the question, why did Makabayan do that despite the lack of resources, and in terms of machinery, we really don't have the same level of machinery that Marcos or Duterte have. So why did we push for this approach, this elections in 2025? So later on, we will answer that. But just to establish that in this election, there are two major political factions, and recognizing that Makabayan and also the weakened opposition forces under the Liberal Party. Next slide, please. So because we recognize that the elections is really a playground of the ruling class, there's an illusion that there's democracy in the Philippines. A lot has been said about the elections, that it's the ultimate equalizer, because whether you're rich or poor, you only have one vote, and that vote counts to the success or failure of the candidate. So bottom line is, they're creating an illusion that because of the elections, there's a vibrant democracy in the Philippines. Whether you're rich or poor, you're allowed to run. for any elective position as long as you comply with the requirements of the Commission on Elections. And it creates that feeling, or that disillusioned feeling, that uh, um, uh, strong advocates, even the left, are allowed or are able to run in the elections, despite knowing the fact that the landlords, the ruling classes, have mastered strategy on how to win the rotten elections in the Philippines. So the way that they establish their votes, or their how to win their votes, is they ask for the votes from the voters, and the way that they ask it is a couple of things. One, by um, buying the votes. Vote buying is very prevalent in the Philippines, especially from this week, today, until the 11th hour of the elections, which is Sunday night, or even early Monday morning. Envelopes containing uh, different amounts of money will flood across the different communities because of vote buying. And if voters are not swayed by vote buying, then of course there's the concept of command voting, where landlords and local leaders, or local oligarchs, would control the votes by commanding their constituencies, whomever is within their scope of their territory, or oligarchs forcing their workers to vote for their candidates. Next slide, please. So, what is the circumstance, or what is the situation, the political situation for the election, for the 2025 election? So, as I've mentioned earlier, there's really a very strong contradiction ongoing. It's a boiling contradiction between Marcos and Duterte. Now that Marcos has declared not really an all-out war against the Duterte, but a subtle, quote-unquote, all-out war against the Dutertes, to make sure that the Dutertes are unable to establish or reestablish their political power through the elections. Marcos has allowed the ICC to capture Rodrigo Duterte and bring him to the Netherlands, while at the same time allowing Congress to go through with the impeachment process of Sara Duterte. So there are different. While Marcos is focused on creating an illusion that he is working hard for the economy, working hard for diplomacy, the betterment of the political situation in the Philippines, allowing dissent, quote unquote, from the opposition. He's trying to build an image, or he's trying to rebuild his image, that the Philippines is enjoying a vibrant democracy, while at the same time ensuring that Duterte, his number one contender right now, his rival right now, will not be able to reestablish their political influence and power in Congress and in the Senate. So that's why the 2025 midterm elections is very critical for both Duterte and Marcos. Well, for one, Sara Duterte will have to bank on the PDP Laban candidates to win the election, to prevent the impeachment trial that is pending right now in the Senate, while at the same time, Marcos is pushing for the Alianza to uh, to what do you call this? The candidates would most likely impeach or proceed with the impeachment trial and impeach Sara Duterte from the vice presidency. So this kind of power play really reflects on the condition, the political condition that we have in the Philippines right now. While we see it as some sort of victory if Sara Duterte will be impeached, on the other hand, it will solidify the stronghold control, political control of Marcos, both in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. Probably, we don't know. 2028 elections might not even push through if Marcos is able um, to finally disregard or finally erase the political control and influence of the Dutertes in the Philippine politics. However, we're also looking at the possibility that within the Marcos faction, within the Marcos group, they are grooming Speaker Martin Romualdez, currently the House Speaker and the cousin of Marcos himself, to run for presidency in 2028. While of course on the Duterte side, Sara Duterte has already announced several times, even though she keeps on saying that she has not formally announced it, but in many speeches, in many statements, she has alluded that she is running for president in 2028. Next slide, please. So, how are they doing this? As I've mentioned earlier, there are different. Since this is a playground of the ruling class, they have instrumentalities, they have tools within their control and power to enforce and implement their strategies. So one of which is, of course, the commission election. Right now, the current election system that we're using is MIRO, MIRU system, the MIRO system. This is a Korean election system, and for some weird reason, MIRO system did not even pass in the accreditation of the Korean government for their elections. So not surprising, however, the MIRO system is the same system that countries controlled by the US, including Iraq, Syria, several other countries in the Middle East and in Africa, are using the same election system, MIRO, for their automation, for their automated elections. So now that we have identified this, later on we'll present to you how the US is directly intervening in the elections in the Philippines. So the Philippine government has accredited the MIRO system through the commission election to be our election system, despite the strong opposition from different factions or different groups in the Philippines. And of course, the state forces, including the Philippine National Police, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, have continuously been maximized or utilized as to implement or enforce the strategies of both the Duterte and the Marcos. Of course, within the police force, there's a faction that is still influenced and controlled by the Duterte group, while the leadership and a faction of the PNP is being controlled by the Marcos as well. That's why over the last 90 days in the elections, cases of red tagging, harassments, it never stopped. It even intensified during the election system. The posters of MAKABAYAN candidates have been continuously violated or vandalized by the state forces under the NTF-ELCAP with red tagging notices against the MAKABAYAN candidates. Next slide, please. So to distinctly define what are the characteristics, or what are the characteristics and nature of the Philippine elections, we've come up with a list of 8 characteristic. One, as I've mentioned earlier, it's a playground of trapos, the traditional politicians, the political dynasties. A lot of politicians would have that messianic messages or populist messages that only them can save the crisis that we are experiencing in the Philippines. Patronage politics, which is characterized as well under a feudal system. And as I've mentioned earlier, the 4Gs, guns, goons, golden girls. Of course, there's the widespread cheating. And now, since we are automated, it's now also electronically electronic cheating. There's foreign intervention, and of course, the massive misinformation and disinformation. To deep dive on each of those characteristics, next slide, please. So, for the traditional politicians, almost all candidates in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, in the party lists, we consider them as trapos, except for some opposition leaders and, of course, the MAKABAYAN coalition. You'll see that the names of the Arroyos, the Marqueses, the Dutertes, the Villars, the Cayetanos, these names have been in politics since even martial law, post martial law, and now it's 2025. The same names have been winning election after election, and a lot of them has already established their political control and influence in within their territories. So the concept of trapos, you know, lording over the elections is a very common. It's a very common characteristic that even anyone, despite knowing that they are trapos, it's being normalized during elections. Next slide, please. And the same list of trapos are the same set of people who belong to political dynasties. When Marcos won in 2022, the feeling was like 1969 all over again, as what the oldies or our elders have shared to us, because it seems that a lot of people have been expecting Marcos to win, and they're celebrating his victory as if the Philippines has become a first world country, as if we have resolved all the political economic crisis that we are experiencing. The jubilation of a lot of people seeing that Marcos would be able to deliver the Philippines from poverty. So that kind of euphoria is actually attributed to a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and the years that Marcos has built to reestablish their image, their reputation, their family name, um, uh, since the return of Imelda and Bongbong Marcos in 1991. Remember that the Marcos family tried to re-enter Philippine politics in 1992. Unfortunately, the Marcoses lost. It was in 1995 and 1998 that they were able to regain Ilocos when, if I'm not mistaken, Bongbong Marcos, or was it Imelda, who ran for governor in Ilocos province. And since then, they were able to reestablish their their dynasty across the Ilocos region. Similarly, the Dutertes, the Villars, all these families, all these political dynasties have begun their establishment of political dynasties um, post post martial law. And if we recall, the Cory Aquino administration allowed the return of landlords, oligarchs, despite the so-called victory of the Filipino people when we ousted Ferdinand Marcos Sr. in 1986. And while there's an old there's a list of old families who belong to political dynasties. There are new names or new families that have sprouted over the last couple elections, and that's including the Tulfos, even the Pacquiaos in Mindanao. The family of Manny Pacquiao, you'll be surprised that his wife is running for Congress. His brother is running for mayor or governor. His cousin is running for councilor. So a lot of Pacquiaos have been establishing have been establishing their their dynasty as well, and of course the Dutertes. So uh, the concept of uh, political dynasties is actually attributed to who controls the land, who controls the businesses, uh, who has influence in the local political power, and the same list of names name a region and people can identify who are the landlords, who are the oligarchs, and they are the same set of people that are in government. Next slide, please. And the false messiah characteristic, as what I've mentioned earlier, is the idea that the populist agenda, the populist messaging. I mentioned earlier that they promised 3 to 6 months is going to end poverty in the Philippines. Marcos said he's going to bring down the price of rice to 20 pesos, and a lot of people believe them, knowing because of out of sheer desperation, because of poverty, because of the crisis that we are all experiencing. It made them believe that these people, these ruling classes, can really save them from poverty. Next slide, please. And of course, patronage politics. This is attributed to the classic feudal system of who controls the land, who is the haciendero or haciendera, who is the kingmaker within the local government. That's what I said earlier. Name a region or name a province, and people can easily identify the names of the local landlords or the local oligarchs, and some of them have been in that position for many years since martial law. For example, Coangco, Danding Coangco, although well, he's dead. The Coancos have uh, clearly influenced a lot in the political spectrum or in the political arena right now in the Philippines. While there are new players like Razon, the support of Villar across other political dynasties and trapos as well, um, it it shifted the landscape of well, not really shifted, but maintained, I mean, the landscape of the control of whomever is the landlord, whomever is the oligarch, will be um, the local patron of politicians. Next slide, please. So another characteristic is the guns, goons, gold, and girls. I think everyone is familiar with guns, goons, gold, using guns, violence, force to influence political control. Goons using private armies, despite the what do you call this, the illusion that Duterte has disbanded a lot of goons in the Philippines and focused the what do you call this, the strategy in against terrorism, things like that. Uh, there is a widespread um, what do you call this, number of goons for each political dynasty or family. And of course, gold refers to resources, controls the resources, controls the political power as well. And this is something new. And there's really, this is very controversial because the way politicians now have included um, the commercialization of women, the objectification of women as a form of entertainment in different political sorties, campaigns. There was even one candidate, Francis Tolentino, in 2019, sorry, 2016, uh, that he used girls dancing on the stage with skimpy skirts to entertain people attending the sortie. So that kind of chauvinist and misogynist behavior has been ongoing in different forms and different types in the elections, despite the fact that the commission election has outlawed or would sanction any candidate um, that is found to be sexually abusive. There's still a wide number of candidates or politicians who follow the strategy of entertaining the voters with women dancing on stage. That's that's how disgusting the political system is in the Philippines. Next slide, please. And of course, there's widespread cheating. You'll notice that this is not new. What's new, however, is because of the automated election system, we are now entering um, an era where the election it can be um, uh, cheated automatically. So if just one click of a hacker to change the source code or the results of the election, it can be done electronically or digitally. Next, please. And another characteristic is the intervention of for there's foreign intervention. As I've mentioned earlier, even before Smartmatic, right now we're using Miro. These election systems are not even accredited in the countries of their origin. And like I've mentioned earlier, Miro as an election system is the same election system that is used by almost all countries controlled by the US. Next, please. I think Tata and Sophia already mentioned about disinformation and misinformation. And as I mentioned earlier, a classic example is how Marcos was able to reestablish their name, their reputation through misinformation, disinformation. It took them more than 20 years to to 20 years of disinformation and misinformation to return to power. And of course, they have used, if you heard about the Cambridge Analytica in 2022, it's an American consulting firm that use data and algorithm to establish information to directed towards a certain or towards a specific segment of the population. So, for example, if this group of people love watching YouTube or any TikTok videos, Cambridge Analytica would send a lot of videos about the Marcoses, build the name of the Marcoses subtly, very subtly. Some would put them as advertisements. Some would show documentaries. Some would even show what the Marcoses have done during martial law. So a lot of misinformation, disinformation have been established in the years that there's no what do you call this? There's no counter propaganda against the Marcoses. Next slide, please. Now, this slide, this is showing us how much the government or how much the commission election has allowed each candidate to spend during the campaign period. So for the president and the vice president, they're allowed to spend 10 pesos per voter. And assuming that there's there are about 50 or 60 million voters, they're allowed to spend around 690 million pesos in 2022. Similarly, for senator and congressman, they're allowed to spend that amount of money only. However, as per submission of their SOSI, what we call the Statement of Contributions and Expenditures, this is mandated by law that all candidates after the elections are required to submit a list of expenses and contributions that they receive throughout the election. You'll notice it's very deceiving, because on the next slide, if you can move, please. Next slide. You'll notice the actual amount. Yes, the actual amount that each senator in 2022 have spent during the campaign period. So if you next go to the next slide, please, you'll see there that these candidates, whether they won or they lost, spent this amount during the campaign in 2022. The first one on the list there is Mark Villar, the son of the Villar, the tycoons, the richest family in the Philippines right now. They spent 2.2 billion pesos. Joel Villanueva, who belongs to the religious group JIL of Eddie Villanueva, spent about 2 billion pesos. You'll notice that almost all candidates, including even Lenny Robredo and the opposition, spent more than 1 billion during the campaign period. So the question is, not only that the commission election has mandated or has set the amount on how much they can spend, the question is how will they be able to regain the expenses that they incurred during the campaign period, when a senator, if you go to the next slide, please, will show you how much they earn on a monthly basis. So a senator earns about 3.4 million pesos, or 3.5 million pesos annually. And since they have a 6-year term, so we'll just calculate 3.5 times 6, that's roughly about 21 million pesos for the entire term that they are sitting in the Senate. Similarly, for the House of Representatives, for Congress, for the House, it's almost the same as a senator. But looking at the list earlier, you'll notice that they have spent more than 1 billion pesos. So obviously, the question on how will they regain or how will they get back the amount that they have spent during the campaign period would tell us that once they win in the Senate, or once they are sitting in the Senate, it is expected that they can get more than just 1 billion pesos in different government projects, contracts, lobbying from policy lobbyists from big businesses, tobacco, telco, airlines. All the oligarchs would lobby for policies that would benefit their businesses. Next slide, please. That's why we always keep saying that voting is a democratic right of the people, while there is an illusion that the elections is an example, or the election is a manifestation of a vibrant democracy. It's very important to always share and explain that the election voting is a democratic right of the people. Next slide, please. This slide and the next slide will just uh, it shows us the provisions in the Constitution on the um, constitutionality of the democratic right of the people to vote. Next slide, please. So, why do we still even bother joining the elections, knowing that it's a playground of the ruling class? It's a rotten political system that we know we cannot win. It's a system that cannot be won over by an election. And this debate has been ongoing. This debate has been, well, not ongoing, but has started even way back in martial law or post martial law. If you recall, in 1986, the left movement under the Partido ng Bayan has tried as well to field candidates for the Senate, but unfortunately, despite the popularity of the left at that time, there is still an effort to isolate and discount the contributions of the National Democratic Left, or the ND movement, National Democratic Movement, to participate in the electoral system. We there's there's what do you call this? For the lack of a better term, no, left out. We were left out in 1986 when Partido ng Bayan ran for the elections, despite there's a broad coalition of opposition leaders under the Aquino administration. Fast forward to 2025, this is a historical election because, like what I said earlier, it's the first time over a long period of time that we are fielding an almost complete senatorial slate. In 2010, we fielded Saturo Campo and Lisa Masa for senator under the Nationalista Party of Manny Villar, in an attempt um, to show to the Filipino people that the National Democratic Left, the National Democratic Movement is ready to step up in the political arena by fielding senatorial candidates in the election. And since then, we have been consistent in fielding candidates. In 2013, we have Teddy Casino. In 2016, we have Nery Colmenares, also 19 and 2022. Also including Kabong Labog in 2022. But those were under the condition that we need to ally, or we need to field candidates under a strong political alliance of a major political party running in the elections. This is the first time in 2025 that MAKABAYAN has fielded an almost complete slate. In fact, despite the strong popularity of Kiko Pangilinan, of Bam Aquino showing in the surveys right now, the opposition the opposition under the Liberal Party is unable to field complete slate for the senatorial elections. It's MAKABAYAN. It's only MAKABAYAN who belong to the opposition that is able to field an almost complete slate in the elections. So that's an important thing to consider, because, as I've mentioned earlier, one major reason why MAKABAYAN has fielded an almost complete slate, it's because this is already a pre-positioning for the 2028 elections as well. Okay. And one of the primary reason why we still need to join the election is remember that the parliamentary struggle is still an arena for us to advance the advocacy, people's agenda, and a lot of there have been a lot of victories and success stories that we are proud of under Makabayan. Remember that Franz Castro is the representative who exposed the confidential funds of Sara Duterte while she was still in the Department of Education and also under her office of the Vice President. So, uh, uh, over the years that Makabayan has been in the political arena, we have significantly we have a lot of success stories that benefit the Filipino people. Next slide, please. And it's still important to consider, despite the rottenness of the political system in the Philippines, a majority of the Filipino people are still yearning for genuine change. I don't think any Filipino people or any person would not want to have a better country for um, uh, for our people, for the Filipino people. It's just that there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, attacks against the left or the opposition that make the elections as how do I say this, as disillusioned as possible, because people still think that PDP Laban or the Alianza of Marcos uh, would be able to deliver them from poverty. But it's important to note that that yearning, that aspiration for change, we need the National Democratic Left, the Makabayan, the left movement needs to take advantage, to reach out to them, to explain to them what is really genuine change and what kind of change do we want for the Philippines. So that's why it's important to note as well the politics of change, politika ng pagbabago, as what we call it, um, is grounded on the idea that we want to eradicate all those the eight that we've identified as the characteristic or nature of Philippine politics. Next slide, please. So, what is the politics of change? This is giving the highest importance on the platform and record of um, candidates whenever they run for any elective position. A lot have been said about Bayan Muna. They have red tagged Bayan Muna and all other Makabayan candidates, but they cannot um, allude that Makabayan or Bayan Muna is corrupt. They cannot label Makabayan or Bayan Muna as abusive. Uh, Never in our track record shows that we have any issue of or any issue of corruption um, since 2001 when we first ran in Congress, and similarly with the rest of the candidates of Makabayan. Another is the politics of change is expanding um, and not just expanding, but enticing progressive leaders, opposition leaders, mainstream, probably even traditional leaders, traditional politicians, to espouse the idea of political change, that we want to change the concept uh, of political dynasties. And we have made significant gains when we allied with other candidates, especially on issues of land reform, on issues of peace talks, on national industrialization. The basis of our unity with Manny Villar in 2010, when he ran for president, is solely because of his willingness to advocate for national industrialization once he is elected as president. And similarly, in 2016, when the MAKABAYAN group supported Grace Poe, it's because of her intention to resolve the conflicts of the roots of armed conflict and resuming peace talks in the Philippines between the government of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. And similarly, any other candidates that Makabayan has strategically and tactically allied with are always grounded on specific issues that we find commonality, or we find, or that these candidates find willingness and openness to include in their agenda during elections. So that is what we're trying um, to build in these elections. And of course, when we talk about politics of change, it's exposing corruption. And definitely, we also look into the track record. While there are some questionable records of some candidates that Makabayan has allied or tactically allied with before, it's always important to note that we would never ally ourselves with abusive, with known political landlords or political dynasties and landlords, specifically like the Marcoses, the Dutertes, the Arroyos, the Cojuangcos, etc. Next slide, please. So I think it's already mentioned earlier. So we have Bayan Muna running for the elections, number 59. I apologize, Kabataan should be number 4, not number 15. ACT teachers, that's number 21, and Gabriela, number 46. I'm happy to share that we just had our meeting, the Avance. It's the culminating activity for the campaign period of Bayan Muna. Earlier today, it was attended by hundreds of people from different communities. If you look at the pages of Facebook pages of Bayan Muna, you can see all the colorful and vibrant festive activity we had earlier today. Next slide, please. Some of the laws that Bayan Muna has enacted into law. So we have the, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but just to highlight a few, the Anti-Torture Act of 2009. This is very important because it criminalizes any form of torture in the Philippines. Also, the PAO, or the Public Attorney's Office, reorganizing and strengthening the Public Attorney's Office. The Public Attorney's Office, by the way, is a government agency that provides lawyers to indigents. So if they cannot afford a lawyer, then the Public Attorney's Office would provide one for any indigent person. And the tax exemption for minimum wage earners, the Tax Relief Act of 2009. Although this was superseded by another law later on, it increased the tax exemption not just for minimum wage earners, but also for those families earning 250,000 or below each year. Okay, next slide, please. One of the most important laws that Bayan Muna has enacted would be the Free Mobile Disaster Act. This is very popular amongst Filipinos, especially that Philippines as a country, we are very prone to a lot of disasters. We have volcanic eruptions, we have typhoons, earthquakes, name it. We all have it here, except for snow blizzard, of course. So the free mobile disaster, when this was being deliberated in Congress, Nery Colmenares asserted that it should be free because telcos, like the big telco companies here in the Philippines, wanted to charge 1 peso for every text message that they're sending out for disaster notifications. But it was Nery Colmenares who asserted in Congress during the deliberations that it should be made free. So it was enacted into law, and now all Filipinos with a smartphone would get a free disaster alert whenever there's a typhoon within the vicinity, or there's an earthquake, or there's volcanic eruption. Next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, so very briefly, what is the party list? I think it was Tata or Sophia who mentioned earlier. Party list is a system that should allow the marginalized sector to be represented in Congress. Back in 1998, when it was first enacted, or it was first implemented, there's only a handful of party lists who ran. Bayan Muna ran in 2001, and we became the number one party list back then. Bayan Muna was able to get historically the biggest or the highest share of votes, which accounted to almost 27%. To win a seat in 2001, before the Supreme Court ruling in 2013, one seat would be equivalent to 2% of the votes. Bayan Muna was able to get 27%. But because under the party list law, a party list can only allow 3 seats or 3 representatives in Congress. So the rest of the votes were wasted. That's why when we realized the big impact that Bayan Muna has at the time in 2004, we also fielded other party lists in other sectors, like Gabriela for women, Anakbayan for the farmers and the workers. We also have, back then it was Anakbayan for the youth and students. We even have Migrante. I'm sure a lot of you is familiar with Migrante uh, uh, party list. We also have another for the government employees courage, although it was disqualified because the COMELEC said that government cannot be represented in Congress. So courage party list was disqualified to run in the elections. And then eventually we have maintained a significant number. It can be considered as a block. That's why we call it the MAKABAYAN block in Congress, because since 2004, we're able to field uh, from 3 representatives to a maximum of 8. There was even one election that we were able to win 8 seats in Congress because we have different party lists winning in the elections. So it was a significant victory for the National Democratic Movement to have representatives in Congress. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges for voters this coming election? So the challenges, well, based on our discussion today, it's the ultimate interest of the ruling classes to remain in power. Of course, they're using all forms of and strategies, tactics to remain in power. And one critical aspect of this is when the candidates of Duterte, of PDP Laban, because if they will win the election, or a majority of them will win the election, that would define the outcome of the impeachment trial against Sara Duterte. And of course, there's reason to believe that the NTF-ELCAC, together with other state forces and agencies, are conducting an operation to um, um, to for Bayan Muna to lose this election. They were successful in doing so with Anakbayan's party list. Anakbayan lost in 2019 and in 2022. That's why they are disqualified to run for party list anymore this 2025. If Bayan Muna will lose this election, they will also be disqualified to run again for 2028. And next slide. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. So I will stop my presentation here because the rest, the AES will now be, it will tackle the actual automated, the technical side of the automated election system. So to summarize my presentation, uh, there's a big challenge ahead of us in these 2025 elections. And making sure that Bayan Muna wins again the election is a significant victory because that will show the rotted political system of Marcos and Duterte that we will fight, Bayan Muna will fight for the advancement and the interest of the Filipino people, despite the attacks that their government, that their state forces has been doing over the last couple of months against Bayan Muna and other Makabayan candidates. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I hope that my presentation was clear enough. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Thank you so much, Sir Lian, for this very in-depth, detailed, based still on the ground presentation. It cleared up many questions for me. I will at this point stop the recording because I think, or we think, that your presentation was detailed enough for those wanting to watch this ED afterwards will have enough information, and for those that are actually attending the Zoom to be able to ask your questions comfortably without like being worried that you'll be recorded. So we'll stop recording now.